Fantasy Focus Football is presented by Geico. Switch to Geico today and see all the ways you could save. Happy Monday. It is June 6th. Field, Matthew, Daniel, and somebody else here that we'll mention in a second. For those who listen in the audio version, for those that are watching on video, you can see already. But Matthew, I have a question for you.
Yes, sir.
Are you familiar with the Spotted Lakes in British Columbia?
No.
Okay, so the reason why I mention them is that they are considered one of the rarest sites in the entire world.
Okay.
Very, very special place to go visit and very, very uncommon to be
rare
seen.
because it's like the lakes aren't always visible?
I'm not sure on that part. I just know that they're extremely rare
Got
to
it.
see. Like, it's a rare sight to see.
Right. Like a four-leaf clover. I noticed you're wearing a Celtic shirt, right? You know, so
Yeah,
sort
it
of like
is.
a little
Yeah, shout out
Irish,
Homage. This
right.
is one of my favorite Celtic shirts. A Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles mashup, which is pretty sweet.
Right.
But no, it's a really rare sight to see.
Right.
Like a four-leaf clover, like Bigfoot, all those things.
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
Also a rare sight to see, at least of late, Stefania Bell.
Stefania Bell.
Yeah.
The Boondoggle 2022 tour takes a quick hiatus.
Right.
For a brief stop in Bristol, Stefania.
She's just packing her bags for the next trip, to be clear.
1,000%. She's just, she's like, let me just grace them with my presence for like an hour.
Right.
You know, like throw a couple of nuggets at Rico and then I'm out again.
Yes.
Yeah, exactly.
It was the Jubilee for the Queen this past weekend. And where's my parade?
Daniel was in charge of the parade.
Wow.
Obviously, ask Daniel.
And?
It's next week. It had to get postponed.
Due to weather concerns.
Weather.
Sorry, guys.
It's sunny,
Weather was
not a
tough.
cloud in sight, but
I
that's
don't
all
want
right.
you to get
too
burned
warm
out.
for you. I want you to be-
It's too
we're looking-
precious to put it out
Yeah,
there.
and by
By the way,
Yes.
she has approval rights over every aspect of the parade. And
Yes.
so, like, you know, the contracts are in triplicate. And so your staff just hasn't gotten you all the paperwork for you to
Look,
sign off
What
on.
was
The
that word you
Queen-
just
the Queen
used?
appeared in-
Triplicate?
Triplicate.
Yeah, the Queen appeared in a hologram, but I actually
That's
came
a real
in
word.
person.
No, I know. I'm sure
They're
it
not
is,
even
but what does
listening
that
to
mean?
me.
No,
It's just
Triplicate
like
is
old
like when you have-
times.
It's like you weren't even on the show in the last 3 weeks.
And when you're, I'm explaining triplicate to Field.
No, this is good. This is good. I don't know what it
And
means.
I just in a contract, like you get three copies.
get three
of a-
copies.
three
Oh,
copies
in
of the
triplicate.
Triplicate.
Wait,
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
you're not kidding?
No, I
You're
didn't know what
joking.
that meant. Yeah. Listen, I
Wow.
went to Wesleyan.
You taught Field
Something.
something.
A
Mark
word.
it
I know.
down on the
word.
calendar.
I know.
Hey, by
It's
the
a
way,
big day.
a spotted lake, in case you guys were curious, because I have never heard of a spotted lake before. Do you know what it is, Stefania?
I do not.
A spotted lake is a small lake rich in variety of minerals, including calcium, sodium sulfates, and magnesium sulfate that in the summer months, the water will evaporate and leave these circles or these like spots that are just the minerals that form on top of the lake. So that's why it's called a spotted lake.
Right. To be
And
true.
that's why it's rare to be seen because
Yeah,
there are
'cause
certain times when it doesn't exist.
Well, to
Exactly.
be clear,
It's just the
I
minerals.
just Googled rare things to see before the podcast,
Oh
and I
my
got
gosh.
Spotted Lakes.
Well, listen, you've already violated the first show of this podcast. It's too much research.
Yeah.
Okay, well, that's
much
the end of my
research.
research.
Thank
So
you.
today's
Good.
show is kind of a mishmash of just stuff that's on our mind. We're going to get to that in just one moment, but just welcome back, Stefania. It's great to
Yes.
see you.
Thank
What
you.
was the favorite
Yes.
place that you visit? You have a very full passport now. You have all the stamps
Yeah.
in every page
Well,
of your
you know,
passport. You
I
are
was
back.
hoping to get to Azerbaijan for the next F1
Sure.
race, but I had to cut it short to be here.
Sure.
'Cause,
Yeah,
you know,
of course.
So that just
Does the
tells you
PJ
how
not get
much
there on
you
time
mean
for-
to me. Well, you know, Monaco and back, and then
Understood.
You know,
Could you
Stefania-
spell that place?
Azerbaijan.
Yeah, could you spell that?
SUNNY, not near TMR. How's that?
F1.
Yeah.
That's right. Actually correct.
You know, also, Stefania did say something before the podcast, though. That,
She did.
like, I'll never forget it.
What's that?
She said, I actually missed you guys.
She did say
I
that.
d-
I
I
heard her
did.
say that.
Yeah.
I
And I
did.
was a little bit, like, I almost didn't do the show because
Were
I
you
was like, it
verklempt?
can't possibly be as good as that moment when Stefania admitted to missing us.
It's true. It's true. You guys are like my family. Hate you when I'm with you. Love you when I'm away from you.
Okay.
You know?
Jackson, I need you to clip that for me. But the second part, get out. Just it's true.
Hate you when
I
I'm with
missed
you.
you. I just need Stefania saying that. If you just clip that and send that to me, because I was trying to do a TikTok and, you know,
Right.
didn't
Yeah,
get it on
you
there.
don't.
I'm
You're
on
big on the talk these days.
I'm on the talk. I'm on the talk. I'm
Only
trying
if
to.
one of your daughters helps you. Let's be clear.
My daughters are my social media team.
You are coming, like, honestly, like, do you think the D'Amelios, like, what's going through their mind these days?
Shaking in their boots is
They
what's
have
going.
to be
yeah.
shaking in their boots.
Yeah.
They're like,
Yeah.
wait, Matthew Berry's on TikTok? Do we switch to what's new? What's new since TikTok? Is there a different app we can now use?
Exactly. I would just like to point out that a year ago,
I didn't know
you
they
didn't know who the D'Amelios were.
Yes,
I brought up Charlie D'Amelio on this show, and
Yeah.
you're like, "Who's that?"
That's
you
two
legitimately
things.
said, "Who's
You've
that?"
taught Field
Two
two things. Two
That's
things.
right.
Charlie D'Amelio
and
and
triplicate.
triplicate.
Right. Exactly. Shout out to the D'Amelio sisters, by the way.
There's three.
By the way, can
wait,
I,
wait.
hang on.
Is this like Jay? Like, are you friendly with the D'Amelio sisters?
I will tell you. I'm going to tell you a story. I do not know them.
Oh,
I do not know them.
Okay.
But I will tell you that I am actually good friends with somebody that is in their universe that does a lot of business with them.
Marvel universe?
No, D'Amelio universe could be just as super powerful, by the way.
I don't know. You're part of so many universes.
No, hang on.
It's hard to keep track.
But my daughters, like pretty much every young girl in America, are massive fans of Charlie and Dixie. Okay. And so for their birthday last year, I sent a note to my friend just saying like, hey, my girls are massive fans of Charlie and Dixie, and got back a very sweet video message from Charlie for my daughters.
Wow.
Oh,
so just a personal like happy birthday, and my girls of course flipped out. You know,
Can I tell a story in a similar vein?
Sure.
So anyway,
I'm just saying they were very nice. It was they didn't have to do it. It was a private thing. It was just very sweet of them to do.
So I sent a note to Damien, who works extremely closely with Matthew, because when Kinley turned 3 months old, I expressed to Damien how much of a fan she was of Matthew, and was hoping for perhaps like a video message, like perhaps like 3 months in, like if you're looking for new parents, like I have some suggestions.
Sure.
Hoping for some sort of like motivational video.
What happened?
Damien sent me back a promo code for 10% off of rotopass.com.
Oh, and did he give you Matthew's Cameo link so that you could actually get the video still, or no?
I mean, like, I'm not doing this for free. Like, I mean, come on. Like,
Damien was he actually offered me not just a promo code, but I got 13 months. Normally you get 12 months, 12 full months.
Yeah.
I mean, honestly, what's going to help your daughter more, like a dumb little video from me or 13 months of the ultimate fantasy football resource, rotopass.com, which includes ESPN+.
I will say this really quickly. One thing that I do know is that Charlie and Dixie are both huge fans of Ravens running backs, and I just don't want to do any disservice and not talk about them.
Yeah, we'll get into it.
That's a great point, Dan. That's actually where we were going with all this. The entire conversation led up to this moment.
We got there.
So the show is basically what's on our mind today. And we're going to start with Stefania because, duh. Stefania, let's talk about those Ravens running backs right now. Because on paper, it looks like the depth chart might be easy to figure out. You know, you got to figure it's J.K. Dobbins at the top, probably Gus Edwards right behind him. And then you're like, wait, hold on. Those guys are both coming off of ACL tears. They're running backs. I know guys can come back from ACL tears, and we're seeing it more and more effectively every single year that goes by. And yet, it's still a little bit concerning when it is a running back, and it's not even a full year removed from the injury. So how are you thinking about, and what do you know about these Ravens running backs these days?
So it's interesting because I actually wrote a little piece that'll be coming out when our mag comes out on how
on a private jet when you were in between cities. Got it.
At least I get my work done.
Understood. Well,
with all my other obligations.
Sometimes.
But let's talk about that, because ACL injuries, we know, as Field, you mentioned, they happen all the time. We get accustomed to them. But I think what's happened is people have gotten so accustomed to see athletes coming back that they just assume that they're going to come back and be 100%, especially if you have an injury that's earlier in the year. And in this case, for J.K. Dobbins, in fact, it was the last preseason game, so it was before the regular season even started.
Yep.
And that would be a dangerous assumption to make.
Okay.
And I think it just serves as a reminder that not all recoveries are created equal. Normally, you expect to see guys doing pretty much everything transitioning to football activities, maybe around 9 months to a year. But John Harbaugh had an interesting comment back in March.
Okay.
And in March, when he spoke with media, he said, there's a chance they begin on the PUP list. That is a strong thing to say that far ahead of the season, which lets you know that they were at least thinking that might be the case. Now, doesn't mean that they couldn't come off it, doesn't mean they might not start the season on time, but you would generally expect, I present to you Cortland Sutton, wide receiver, I know, not a running back, but remember, he got injured in week 1 of the year prior, and look at all the stuff that he was doing football-wise before we even got to camp, and he was ramped up and integrated and playing. If they are concerned that they could start on the PUP list, and it's not just J.K. Dobbins, it's also Gus Edwards, because he tore his ACL just like a week later. I think it was first week of September. That just tells you the Ravens are concerned. And so I've been watching very carefully what they've been doing at running back to make sure they have enough staff there in the event those two aren't ready. And it's also one thing to be cleared to play and ready to participate, but return to performance is a whole nother matter.
All right, so we'll see. And by the way, just one point of clarity, not that Stefania doesn't know this, but for those that are unfamiliar with how the NFL's PUP rules work, you can begin training camp on the PUP list.
Come off
and come off of it the second day of training camp. And that means that you no longer are eligible for the regular season PUP list. But if you begin training camp on the PUP list and are not activated to the 53-man roster at final cutdowns, that means you're out for the first 6 weeks of the regular season. And it's not uncommon to see teams open with 12 or 15 players on the PUP list at the start of training camp.
I think from a fantasy perspective, here's what I'd be concerned about. Let's assume they start the season or the training camp on the PUP list, and they're doing work with the team, and eventually they get integrated into practice, et cetera. But they're not activated till the season starts. For fantasy purposes, you have no idea what you're getting, and I think it's dangerous to assume that you're getting the player who left the field in August of last year automatically coming back to that if there's no participation in preseason games.
J.K. Dobbins, of course, going first amongst all Ravens running backs. Worth noting, they also added Mike Davis after they actually removed the tender from Tyson Williams, who was an exclusive rights free agent. He now plays for the Colts. He's no longer in Baltimore. Mike Davis is there as the healthy running back for now.
Yeah, so the former Atlanta Falcon, the former Chicago Bear, the former Seattle Seahawk. Mike Davis,
Carolina Panther,
and
too.
Carolina Panther, yeah, of course. Sorry. So Mike Davis is there. Justice Hill is still there,
coming off an Achilles tear,
right?
Though,
I
so
understand.
like,
I mean, but and Tyler Batty, they drafted
6th-round pick out of Mizzou.
Nice there. But remember, here's the thing with the Ravens. Last year, they signed, the ghost of Devontae Freeman, the ghost of Le'Veon Bell, the ghost of Latavius Murray, and got solid production out of all those guys, especially Devontae Freeman. So I think the Ravens, probably more than any franchise in the NFL, subscribe to a running back is a running back is a running back theory that you see, that is often touted by many, many sharp analytical minds. And so I can see why that team, more than any other, would be less ringing the alarm bell that their top 2 running backs might start the season on the physically unable to perform list. But I do think it's an important point, Field, just as people are doing best ball drafts or as thinking about August, that this is a story that I think everyone sort of assumes, they'll be healthy, they'll be fine. Dom's going to be awesome this year. And it's just like, we need to pay attention to Stefania. We need to pay attention to this storyline because there's a chance Mike Davis starting running back of the Ravens game 1.
Sure. Let's keep an eye on this one as we get closer and closer to training camp. Daniel Dopp is always on my mind. He's such a beloved friend and he stands for all the right things. And his Detroit Lions have been on my mind.
What does he stand for?
I just mentioned the loyalty, right?
Yes.
Incredibly compassionate. He's sensitive. He's got this unbelievable selflessness. He has zero cares for himself and only puts
really
others
serious.
before
I
him.
was gonna make jokes. But
No, Matthew's
nice
he's trying to undercut you.
Yeah,
We all love Daniel.
Be very clear about that. Yeah, I mean, just
What else is new,
very
right? What else is new?
Yeah, when you say he doesn't care about himself, are you saying like from
he's
a hygiene
selfless.
standpoint?
Like I should take. I should
Oh,
pour effort
he's
into
got
my
beautiful
looks.
hair.
Yeah.
No, he's got a
Thank
great
you.
beard.
Someone
He's
thought
got
I was George Kittle earlier. They asked me for an autograph.
wow.
Yeah.
It is
Did
the
they
first
really?
day.
Is it an intern?
Was it one of the interns?
The intern?
First day for ESPN interns
we
here
had
today.
first day of ESPN interns,
Oh
and they
my
all
gosh.
came in, and
Did they
whoever
really
that
think
intern
that?
was
That's
off to a
so
bad
sweet.
start.
No, come on. All right, anyway, so here's what's on my mind. The Lions are on my mind today.
TJ
And do you remember last year who some people thought could be the Lions' leading receiver going into the season? Do you remember who that player was?
Yes.
That was Tyrell Williams.
Tyrell Williams, who was cut in the middle of the season after sustained a concussion. He's not on the team right now. All right, so we're talking about a player who's no longer in the NFL at this present moment, potentially being the Lions' number 1 wide receiver. It's another way of saying that they were not deep at wide receiver last year. They eventually had Amon-Ra St. Brown break out in a major way. We'll talk about him in just a moment. But last year, Deandre Swift averaged 6 catches per game. 5 catches per game, 6 targets per game.
Yep.
But you do the math, I want to, so that would be in a 17-game season, 85 catches, so over 90 targets. That's a lot of action for any running back. Last year, when Deandre Swift played, this is not a Deandre Swift stat, it's a Lions stat, but they were 1-11-1 in the games that he appeared last year. They were always playing from behind, right? I mean, that's what happens when you're on a team that's just short of talent in certain spots. This year, Detroit looks much better on paper in the passing game, right? We think Amon-Ra St. Brown's going to continue to do what he did last year. TJ Hawkins is a really good player. We'll see when Jamison Williams is on the field, but they added DJ Chark as well. Like, there's
Josh
some
Reynolds
actual...
is not a scrub either.
Josh Reynolds played really well for them down the stretch, right? So you've got actual solid passing game targets this year. What I'm wondering is, I have Deandra Swift 11th in my running back ranking. It's not that far off, actually just one spot behind the consensus. But I wonder if the way that Deandra Swift gets there this year to this borderline RB1 status is if he runs the ball 225 times and finds the end zone 10 times as a runner. Because doesn't it feel like the passing game usage is bound to regress this year?
I think it is, but it also may be more efficient. Again, we think this offense is going to be better. We think that they will be in scoring position more often. So maybe he gets 20 less receptions, but maybe he gets 3 more touchdowns this year. You know what I'm saying? Like,
yeah, but I think it's my point would just be like, it's much easier to count. Like if you're going to predict
correct
a regression, it's much easier to predict a regression of 20 catches than it's like, oh, he might just fall in the end zone 3 more times, or we could have 0 receiving touchdowns next year, which isn't that crazy for running back either.
Right. I guess part of for me, like I have Swift at 9, so I'm more bullish on him than
2 spots.
I understand. Fair. But we all like him as a RB1, as a lower end RB1. You have at 11, like if you want to nitpick, whatever, high end RB2, but whatever. We're all sort of right there with Deandre Swift. And I am pro Deandre Swift for a couple reasons. I think the team will be better. I think the offense will be better. I think their offensive line will be better. And more importantly, from anything else, he's just really good. He's a really good running back. He's just super talented. We've talked about this before, that if Deandre Swift had landed in a different spot coming out of college, he likely would have been the #1 rookie running back drafted that year. It was only because of concerns about the Lions, their offense and their line, that Swift went a little bit later than he probably should have in rookie drafts that year. Swift's a really, really talented running back. Yeah. And again, I think they'll be in scoring position a lot more often. And I do think he is such a good pass catcher that whereas the passing usage may regress some, I don't think it regresses significant because it's such a weapon. It's such a part of his game.
Maybe, yeah, maybe. But Jamal Williams, awesome in the passing game as well. You've got like 6 guys who can, I'm not saying that I've got him at 11. I'm curious. I've got this one earmarked here because if he's more a runner than a receiver this year, and they continue to split carries with he and Jamal Williams like they did last year, like it might be a more difficult path to be in a borderline RB1 for Deandre Swift than I initially thought.
Did you see photos of him by any chance this offseason? Like
is he in the best shape of his life?
Well, he is in the best shape of his life, but he came to camp like noticeably ripped. Like he looks thicker than he was last year for sure. I
also would argue that a lot of the players going in that range all have sort of nitpicky things that you could talk about there. You've got Aaron Jones in a split with A.J. Dillon. You've got Nick Chubb in a potential 3-way split with Kareem Hunt and Dearness Johnson. You've got James Conner, who we've talked about, maybe getting vultured some by Darrell Williams and his injury concerns here. So there's a lot of guys sort of in that range that you could certainly poke holes in if you want. I'm more of at that level, I'm willing to bet on the talent and Daniel, close your ears, and an improvement by this Lions offense than I am in just that I don't think some of his production was definitely junk time inspired, but I don't think all of it was. And
they
I
were
don't
111-1 when they played last year. How much more junky does that? I know they played some tough games.
They were bad from start to finish.
Right, so I'm saying like everybody, almost the entire team's production last year.
Well, of course, it's junk time. And I think they're a year away. I mean, I don't think they're going to be like competing for the division title this year. I just think they'll be more competitive.
Down on them competing for the division title, by the way.
Wow.
Yeah, $25.
Yeah.
$25 at what odds?
I'm not. If they win the division,
is it plus 400 million?
No, they win it like 40-1.
If they win the division, I believe that $25 bet would be I would win $550 on it.
All right.
And if they win the NFC North, the NFC Championship, then the $25 bet would win $1,525. All they have to do is just win the entire NFC.
Yeah,
all right.
Which is likely.
Anyways, that was on my mind. The question was what's on our mind. That was on my mind. So what's on your mind about the Lions?
My question was about Amon-Ra St. Brown. Yeah. And I love Amon-Ra St. Brown. I have him in our Dynasty League. So I'm a big fan of Amon-Ra St. Brown. My concern is that you look at his production down the stretch. And to your point, right? So TJ Hawkinson was out for a lot of that. So if we have TJ Hawkinson back healthy, and
we should.
Right? And you've also got DJ Shark and a healthy DJ Shark that they've added. We'll see what happens with Jameson Williams. But Deandre Swift, we expect to be, it depends on how much, but we know he's going to be part of the passing game.
Yeah, definitely.
My concern here on Amon-Ra St. Brown, over the final 6 weeks of the season, when he won a lot of people their fantasy championships, when he was just Awesome. He had a 33.5% target share.
Yep.
33.5%. Right? His percentage of team receptions, 36.7%. That's higher than Davante Adams.
Yeah.
He had 37% of the team's receiving yards. That's higher than Jamar Chase. He had 38.5% of the team's touchdown catches. That's a higher rate than Justin Jefferson. I just, like, to me, if ever there was a guy that, like, caught lightning in a bottle at a certain time when they were down big, it was a lot of junk time, and there was no one else to throw to, it's Amon-Ra St. Brown. Do I think he's a fluke? No, I think he's a good player. Do I think he's going to be a productive fantasy player this year? I do. Do I think he's going a little bit too high? Currently going as wide receiver 22? I do.
Okay, so I think that I have two counterpoints to that, even though it's what's on your mind and not what's on my mind.
Correct. But that's what's on my mind.
So the reason why, like, I would have been more skeptical of, or why I was more skeptical of, like, Travis Fulgam a couple of years ago. Travis Fulgam, I see.
Yeah.
Now that we have
Tyler
Fulgam,
Fulgam. Yep.
Travis
I knew where
Fulgam,
you
who
were
for the
struggling
Eagles
with.
had like a 5-week stretch of being the best wide receiver since Jerry Rice, is like a different level of pedigree, right? I think he was a 6th-round pick out of Old Dominion. He'd been waived a couple times by the Lions, including by the Lions. Like, you know, he was on the practice squad for much of last year. Amon-Ra St. Brown, like, I believe is like a legitimate talent. I know he went in the 4th round, but maybe that the NFL is already admitting they probably should have not allowed that to happen. And the other thing is that, and this is a line that you often use, Matthew, is the players you just compared him to are going like 1, 2, 3, and 4 in wide receiver ranks. Aren't the reservations kind of baked into the ADP, which is currently wide receiver 22?
Sure. But my point is by comparing him to those players, like the idea that Amon-Ra St. Brown, a 4th-round rookie, had his production when he was getting a target share higher than Cooper Kupp's.
Sure, yeah.
Like, it's just like, do we think that's repeatable? We don't. I don't. How about this? I don't. I don't want to speak for anyone else. I don't think so. And so if he's not getting that kind of insane target share, and we think that the team is a little bit more competitive this year, and they've added more weapons, like, he's a slot receiver, and he scored a lot of touchdowns on the stretch, and he's going to score a lot again. And Hawkinson wasn't there. They both sort of, run a lot of routes in the middle of the field. That's my question is like, are we overrating? And by we, I mean everyone else. Yeah. Are they overrating Amon-Ra St. Brown's final 6 weeks of the season in terms of his ADP for this year?
Here are questions I did not think that we'd be asking a year ago. Going into drafts, would you rather have Amon-Ra St. Brown or DK Metcalf? Because he's on my mind right now is DK.
Sure.
DK Metcalf.
Yeah.
Is it because him and I are built similarly? That when you look at me, you're like DK, MB, DK. Hard to tell us apart a lot.
What would be how are you most similar physically?
We both have skin.
Yeah.
We both breathe oxygen.
Yeah.
I think that's about
Yes.
I think so. We
Worried
both have
about
2 legs, 2 arms.
Are you sure?
Yep.
So it all,
I thought you had
I think it
Snickers
probably
for
just kind
knees.
of drops off from right
He's
there.
got, hang on. He's got a 6-pack. I've got a 6-head.
Oh.
So,
Wow.
very similar.
I do want to say this because
He's got a 6-pack. I've got a mini keg.
I'm pretty sure that's another way. I don't know that it's mini. I got to be honest with you.
Full-on kegger.
It's a full-on kegger. I was told dad bods were in. God bless my
dad
wife.
bod, it's a rad bod.
I don't know. God bless my wife.
a bunch of best ball drafts recently. Mind you, best ball, very different than season-long
different game.
fantasy, right?
Yes.
Totally different. Yeah.
Saying that, I do want to say this, even within our ESPN ADP, I think one of the things I want to do in one of these upcoming shows, I've been watching Gabe Davis, the number 2 wide receiver in Buffalo, get drafted before DK Metcalf. And I'm just curious.
Best ball, not crazy to me at all.
Sure, but even in ESPN ADP, I've been like in the mock drafts I've done in there, I've watched Gabe Davis, and I'm curious which team's number 2s do you like more than some of these other team number 1s? Because DK Metcalf is that option to me. Is Drew Lock so bad that DK Metcalf just gets plummeted down the board?
Hang on.
Why doesn't that happen? In all honesty.
So you haven't watched Drew Lock play football. That's what I can tell by that question.
But then let's have this conversation about DJ Moore, because Sam Darnold, from this perspective, is awful. But DJ Moore is still a top 12 wide receiver.
Can I take this one?
floor is yours.
Here's what I would say, and you guys chime in on this. My response to that would be is that in terms of DJ Moore's had pretty bad quarterback play for much of his career, inconsistent quarterback play, and he's always produced numbers, right? And so I think for most people, the concern on DK Metcalf is seeing how bad he was, He was a guy who was like the best wide receiver in fantasy for a stretch there. And then when Russell Wilson went down, his fantasy production was entirely touchdown dependent. He was bad with Geno Smith under center. He was fantasy-wise, right? I mean, like, and so now whether it's Geno or Drew Lock, I think there's concern that DJ Moore is somebody that is produced with inconsistent quarterback play, to be kind. Whereas DK Metcalf, it's a very small sample size, but has not. We expect them to be run heavy this year in Seattle. And finally, and I think also with Gabriel Davis, especially in best ball, because there's a chance that the Gabriel Davis we saw in the playoffs shows up on what we think is going to be one of, if not the best offense in football. And he's clearly the number 2. When they've gotten rid of Sanders, they've gotten rid of Beasley. It's Stephon Diggs and then it's Gabriel Davis.
Let's try to table some of the best ball talk for right now, just because it's such a small, it's so niche with an audience. But I get the point.
You're not wrong.
Also, but the critical,
that would be my response on the DK Metcalf question.
I get you on that, but you alluded to it at the end of your DK Metcalf response. The critical difference is that one of them plays for Seattle, who is stubborn to a fault and will run the ball 45 times and a half if they can. And that last year, it was like every week Pete Carroll was saying, well, we got to find ways to get DK Metcalf the ball more. All right, well, do it. Right? Do it. Like, if you just keep talking about it for 6 or 7 weeks, it means you're not doing a good enough job. Whereas in Carolina, you can fault them for a lot of things over the past few years offensively. The effort to get the ball to DJ Moore has been far superior than Seattle's was last year when DK Metcalf
sucked because they didn't have Christian McCaffrey for half the season.
But he still had 1,200 receiving yards and 5
DJ
touchdowns.
Moore's target share was massive. Robbie
also
Anderson could have been wide open, and DJ Moore had 4 people around him, and they were still forcing the ball to DJ Moore.
You're not wrong about that.
And so. But I have concerns on DK Metcalf. I have DK Metcalf at 19, which is lower than the consensus, which is 16.
It's also an offense that, frankly, I don't trust their run game either. I just think Seattle is going to be potentially an offense that doesn't score many points at all throughout the season.
18 points per game this year. And I'm talking real football points, and it wouldn't stun me.
And there are big question marks at the running back position with whether it's Penny or Ken Walker.
If you draft DK Metcalf, you are banking on his just insane physical talent, which there's no question about, and touchdowns.
But you're also hoping, I think,
he's not a 6 for 97 guy.
He is not going to be a consistently win you every week. He's going to be the boom or bust. You might have one big play, great week, and then you're going to have nothing.
Sorry, I mean, but the weeks he scores, Stefania, 100%.
Field, I want to skip my one, and I just want to do a final point on this. The only thing that I have as a rebuttal to that, and you're not wrong, that DJ Moore has had better quarterback play, and even not better, but he has had consistent quarterback play throughout his awful quarterbacks. He has had.
It's consistently awful.
Consistently awful, I guess, if you want to say.
And you're talking about DK Metcalf with Geno Smith, who came in halfway through the year, didn't know the offense as well. I feel like there was a bit of
Geno knows. He's been there forever. Geno knows the offense.
I think that
Geno's just bad.
Bottom line is we're placing our faith into poor quarterbacks, poor quarterback play, and we have a larger sample size of one guy performing in spite of that poor quarterback play. The other guy, who the 1 year that he's had bad quarterback play, became a shell of himself as a fantasy.
So is Tyler Lockett not even draftable at this point then?
Well, the thing is, Tyler Lockett last year, even with bad quarterback play, still did what Tyler Lockett always does, right? He'll go 2 weeks without a catch, and then he'll have a game with 9 catches for 142 yards and 3 touchdowns. Right?
The problem is that neither guy is because of the way they run their offense, and we expect it to be even more skewed run heavy this year, is that neither guy is somebody that, because to your point about DJ Moore is a guy that can get you 7 for 79, and you can live with that. He doesn't score a touchdown, but he gets you 7 for 79 or whatever it is.
9 points,
exactly, something like that. Whereas Tyler Lockett and DK Metcalf are going to have 3 or 4 receptions a game, basically, and you're hoping one of them's a touchdown. You're hoping one of them's a big, long play, and they both have that ability, and they'll take shots to both those guys, and especially if Drew Lock's the starter, there's definitely a YOLO element to his game, and we saw Cortland Sutton have some big games with Drew Lock under center, so it's not out of the realm of possibility, but the floor of those guys is now much, much lower. When you had Russell Wilson under center, you're listen, we know the crater's not going to fall out from either of these guys because Russell Wilson's just not going to let them. We just don't know what we're going to get out of the Seattle offense this year.
Can I whisper something into the microphone because I'm afraid to admit it? I think I have more confidence in Sam Darnold than I do Drew Lock and also Geno Smith.
Wow. Wow.
It's not much confidence, but it's a little more.
A little bit. Just a little.
By the way,
It's called grasping
with
at
you.
straws.
but I mean, based on what we've seen so far, it's not that like. I mean, it's damning with faint praise, but like we've seen Sam Darnold be competent at times.
I don't. I mean, that's
right?
about as far as we're willing to go. Let's move forward. Let's move forward. I think we agree. I'm going to do a quick live read. We're going to come back and we'll discuss some Broncos players. Does that work, Daniel?
Sure. If you
Okay,
want to,
cool.
yeah.
You know, Geico asks, how would you love a chance to save some money on insurance?
I
The
would.
answer is, of course you would. I know Daniel would. After all, who doesn't love a great deal, right? And when it comes to great rates on insurance for all the things in your life, Geico can help, like with insurance for your car, truck, motorcycle, Stefania's private jet that has several impressive features, including seating for 8, a spa inside the jet. This is oddly specific. Have they been on this jet
specific
before?
live read.
Wow. Also an RV, which is more Matthew style. Even help with your homeowners, condos, or renters coverage. You can save even more with a special discount when you bundle your coverages. Plus, add the easy-to-use Geico mobile app, available 24-hour roadside assistance and more. And choosing to switch Geico becomes an easy choice. Switch today and see all the ways you could save with great rates and discounts. It's easy. Simply go to geico.com to get a rate quote or contact your local agent and get started seeing how much you could save.
What was that? Was that a little jazz tune?
We called this
jazz
elevator
flute.
lounge music, right? Like
Yeah.
you're in the elevator. It's kind of an awkward, like 12-second ride from floor 1 to floor 5.
My first job ever in high school
Can
was
we just do this
I'm
for
afraid.
real quick? Everyone's first job, real
The
fast.
year was
first job-
1938.
my first job was I was a paper boy back when newspapers got delivered. But my
Yeah,
my
but did you wait a
Like
second?
telegraphs.
Wait a second. But
Stood on
it
the
only
corners and
counts
newsy.
if you rolled them yourself
I
and
did.
you did the bike route.
rolled them
Wasn't your parents driving you? It was like
rolled them myself on my bicycle and the newspaper
Give a
that I worked for
basket?
was such a scam. You had to pay for the little plastic bags. Like so you like they made you pay for the plastic bags. It was like 30 cents for a bag or something insane. Like so you barely made any money at
Wright
all.
Brothers
And I
discover
just-
aviation. Wow, this is
And I'll never.
great.
And my boss was a guy named Bud Grubbs. I swear
course.
to
Of
God,
course.
which I've never forgotten it. That was his name. This guy. I think I
Central
lasted
casting.
2 months. I hated it, and like I made no money. And you're getting up at like 4 a.m. or whatever. It was
I just-
awful. But the second job after that is I was a DJ at a local radio station in College Station, Texas, that
was your
played
name?
elevator music. And so I played that kind of music. I didn't speak, but I
do I not
literally
know this?
I would roll tapes. They would have music like this all the time, like 6 hours of like this, like
Did you
like
have to
music of the
introduce
dead.
anything? Were you
No.
like,
I had no idea you were such a cool cat, Matthew Berry. I'm not gonna be honest.
And like this would have been like a big hit for us. Like I would look forward to this. I mean, it was like,
you come back in half an hour. We're gonna have that big hit.
yeah, no,
Imagine
like,
my
I never
son.
talked.
Matthew on his first date with Beth. So what have you done professionally? Well, I used to be a DJ. We played only elevators music, and now I'm a fantasy football analyst.
DJ Flutie Matthew over here. And
It's a miracle. Miracle you got
It
married.
really is. But you know what? I haven't forgotten one of your jobs. You were a gift wrapper
At FAO Schwartz.
at FAO Schwartz.
That's
my
right.
gosh.
Because
I
the
was-
one
I-
Matthew has this talent that he can wrap a gift, which
really good at it.
he's really good at wrapping gifts. Not that I ever receive any, mind you, but if I were to,
Yeah.
it would be really
Well,
lovely and well
because
wrapped.
when I give you a gift, you immediately open it and drink it. So, like,
Sure.
like why am I going to bother wrapping
Why
that?
wrap it?
I mean, why wrap it at all? But yes, after I graduated college, I moved out to LA and I worked at the FAO Schwartz in the Beverly Center.
You know, I'm
I
gonna-
don't know if that still exists, but the Beverly Center does. I don't know if the FAO Schwartz is still there. But yeah, I spent like, I don't know, 8 months there.
I really love the football season for obvious reasons. We all love football season, but I am going to miss this time of the year when it's like middle of the show and we're
Random.
just
Right.
diving deep onto FAO Schwartz gift wrapping jobs and such.
By the way, speaking of like music, like the music they like, I think they've changed it since, but they had a song that just would
that would play on loop at
and
FAO
and on.
Schwartz,
That
yeah.
was similar to "It's a Small World." That
Yeah,
just,
yeah,
It's one of
it's
those
when you
like,
walked in the store.
it
The
was
New York one
brutal.
had it.
Yeah, you can't get it out of your mind. It's one of those. It's like it's just catchy enough to not get out of your mind, and
It's
it's
a
just
worm.
annoying enough that you're like, oh, please shut this
I
off.
don't even know what that store is. Is it an investment company? FAO Schwartz?
No,
It's
it's
a
the big
super
toy store. Do you
famous
remember the
toy
movie
store.
Big where
Oh,
he's
Tom
on the
Hanks
piano.
on the piano?
That's all happens at
It's
FHS
a very
Schwartz.
famous toy store, and for the record, enjoyed working there. Enjoyed working there.
That's great.
Had no issues.
All right, let's move things forward here. Just a couple more. And Matthew, let's start with you.
Sure.
What's on your mind with the Broncos running backs?
Well, just looking at ADP, and it's early, and it's obviously influenced by the default ranks at ESPN, but Javonte Williams is currently going as running back 13, and Melvin Gordon is going at running back 38.
Yeah.
And I get it. Javonte Williams is super exciting, and he had that almost 30-point game at Kansas City in Week 13. And we all saw whoa, Melvin Gordon leaves. This kid could be something special. We all like him. We all think he's a really talented player. But Melvin Gordon couldn't find a job and ended up re-signing with the Denver Broncos. I think a lot of people thought maybe he would be going. And so I don't understand, 13 to 38, should Javonte Williams be ranked higher? Of course he should be. Does he have more upside? He does. But I think this is much more of a split than people are willing to admit, certainly based on the ADP.
Yeah.
Again, running back 13 to running back 38. Get this. Last year, from inside the 5-yard line, Melvin Gordon got 9 carries, scored 4 touchdowns. Javonte Williams got 9 carries, scored 2 touchdowns. 34.7% of Javonte Williams' fantasy points last year came during that 3-week run from weeks 12 to 14 when Gordon was out. He had 29, that 29.8 game against Kansas City was almost 15% of his points for the year. So unless Melvin Gordon gets hurt, and he's been injured in his career, but fairly durable player, I just think that's way too big of a difference between those two running backs, given what I think is going to be much more of a running back by committee than people think. Now, it is a new coaching staff in Denver, and we expect that offense to be a lot more efficient with Russell Wilson under center. But Melvin Gordon's a good pass catcher. You know what I mean? It's not like Javonte Williams is only going to be the pass. Melvin Gordon's a good pass catcher, and I could see Russell Wilson wanting the veteran out there more than
College teammate.
College, there you go. I mean,
narrative.
So, shower narrative right there. And I'll just say that I have them different, but I have Williams at 17, so I have him much lower than consensus, and I have Gordon at 34, a little bit higher than consensus, much closer together. Again, prefer Williams to Gordon, but I think that's way too big a gap between those two players based on what we don't know right now, which is what that split's going to be.
Really fair take, and I think that there are parts of last year that I am willing to consider, and there are parts that I'm not ignoring, but I'm mindful that a new coach staff could certainly change that up. Like the carries inside the 5 last year, that could be as simple as the coaching staff under the previous regime felt like Melvin was better in finishing runs or whatever it might have been, or just a deference to a veteran player. Wouldn't say last year's coaching staff was the most innovative offensively.
No.
But the part that I am willing to consider from last year is that
they were old school guys, and Melvin Gordon's a
totally.
veteran.
I looked by game because I really didn't believe. I believed Javonte Williams. I think I was interested in him in Dynasty, but I believe that he was going to excel way beyond Melvin Gordon. If you look at utilization, it's pretty much an all across all the stats. It's close to
they
a
have the
50-50
exact same number
split.
of carries. They literally the same number of carries, 203 apiece. But the one thing that, so to that point, what I will consider from last year is that eye test. Melvin Gordon still got something left in the tank here. And I know that we just talked about how teams view running backs as fairly fungible, and that is the case. But I do think it's possible for some players to still be underrated. And Melvin Gordon feels like he's been underappreciated over the past couple of years. Let's move forward to Green Bay.
The other thing is, just think about two things real quickly to finish up that point. It's going to come down a lot to what Russell Wilson wants. If Russell Wilson's I want that guy in the backfield, that's the guy going to be there. So we'll see. But to your point, there's a history there with Melvin Gordon.
Yeah.
And the other thing is Nathaniel Hackett comes from Green Bay, where they used a committee the last couple of years as well. Again, it was Jones and, right. Anyway,
that brings us right to Green Bay. Yeah.
What?
And as I say, pretty much every coordinator uses a committee these days, right? It's unless you're the offensive coordinator for the Tennessee Titans or the Indianapolis Colts right now, you're pretty much using a committee. Yeah. But let's move things forward to Green Bay. You just mentioned, Matthew, because another one where I'm assuming you believe the split between the running backs is too significant.
Aaron Jones currently going up. And you guys know I've loved Aaron Jones for many, many years.
Forever.
Free Aaron Jones. Hashtag free Aaron Jones. Started that. Carry it. Wear that flag. Have the tattoo. But Aaron Jones is going as running back 13. I'll show you later. We're on camera. So Aaron Jones is going at running back 13. A.J. Dillon going at running back 32. I mean, last year, Aaron Jones's 15 regular season games last season, he had 171 carries, 799 yards, 4 touchdowns. A.J. Dillon's last 15 regular season games, 178 carries, 766 yards, 5 touchdowns.
Yeah.
I mean, the difference, obviously, is the passing game usage. Aaron Jones got 65 targets, 34 for A.J. Dillon. You can argue no Davante Adams. Jones will be used even more in the passing game this year. Yeah. I get that. But I will tell you that, I went to Matt LaFleur's press conference in Indianapolis at the Combine.
Oh, here we go.
And but here's the thing. He talked about the fact that he thinks both guys are good pass catchers, that he wants both guys out there, that he really feels like he has a 1A and 1B. I think A.J. Dillon's a pretty good player. Yep. No disrespect to Aaron Jones, because I love Aaron Jones. But again, I just think this split is way too big between two guys that, again, I have Aaron Jones ranked higher, but I have him at 14 and Dillon at 25, a much closer gap between Jones and Dillon than what the consensus is right now, where the ADP has Jones at 13 and A.J. Dillon running back 32.
I would submit to you that I believe that most teams would like to operate in this manner with a 1A and a 1B. Unless you are the Tennessee Titans and you have a Derrick Henry, who is a unicorn in terms of how he's built as a running back, or Jonathan Taylor because of what Jonathan Taylor can do. But most teams are seeing the benefit, and it comes to a health perspective as well, that they are going to be better and have more consistency in their run game if they balance the workload, because it's just not – guys aren't built to last running the ball. If you have an offense that is at all heavy on the run, you really want a 1A and a 1B. You prefer that over a lead back. So I think we're going to continue to argue over who's the lead, but I think we're going to see more and more splits that look 55-45, 60-40 than the old 80-20 that we used to see.
If the ADP for A.J. Dillon stays close to where it is, which is currently RB 27.
No, running 32.
RB 32.
Running back 32.
Those that go like deep zero RB strategy, as in like 3 wide receivers and a tight end in your first 4 picks. Actually, I mean, currently A.J. Dillon's not even like a 0 RB target. He's like I literally ignore. I only take wide receiver for the first 8 rounds. But my point is that a player like this is the kind of player I would be targeting if I do go for the 0 RB strategy.
I'd target him regardless.
He is being drafted in the 10th round.
It's insane.
Yeah.
Proud BC graduate, A.J. Dillon.
Basically, he had 200 touches last year, right? 175 some carries and 30 some. Like, how many other running backs in the 10th round are you going to draft that are going to potentially get you 200 targets, 200 touches, and has the ability to take over in case anything happens to Aaron Jones on an offense that he could?
They're gonna with no Davante Adams or Marquez Valdes-Scantling. They've been very balanced recently. I think they'll go even more a little bit run heavy. I think they'll use both guys in the passing game here. But again, for a team that obviously has Super Bowl aspirations in the Green Bay Packers, they need A.J. Dillon to have a significant role because of the way that Aaron Jones is built, because he's had injury issues in his past. Like, it's got to be close to a 50-50 split. And by the way, they've been productive with both guys on the field. That's the thing. They're different players, but like A.J. Dillon, they've not shown a decrease in offensive production when A.J. Dillon's on the field.
Daniel, you are also thinking about the Packers right now.
I am. As a part of this, I'm curious if Alan Lazard is being undervalued too much with where right now someone has to be the wide receiver 1 in that offense, right? And when I'm looking at Green Bay, there's Alan Lazard. There's Christian Watson, who's a rookie out of North Dakota. There's Randall Cobb, who's almost the same age as Matthew.
Yeah.
Right?
That's the ghost of Randall Cobb.
And there's Robert Tonyan and these two
Robert
running backs
Tonyan coming off an ACL.
Yeah. And so knowing that Sammy Watkins. Oh, sorry, you're right. Yeah. Sammy Watkins. He'll play at least 6 games.
Oh, yeah.
So
wow.
As a part of that, someone is going to have to be the true number 1 in this offense. And no offense to Christian Watson, but I feel like Alan Lazard at least has some connection with Aaron Rodgers. And if he's going to throw for 4,000 yards this year, the idea that Alan Lazard could just fall into the role of 1,000 yards and 8 touchdowns, it just seems so easy to me based on what the rest of that pass catching core looks like. I'm just curious.
I think you'd be surprised by, like, 4,000 yards does not guarantee anything close to a weekly starter or wide receiver. Like, you go back and look at some of the players
so deep,
close to 4,000 passing yards, and you're like, oh, that quarterback threw for 4,000 yards, but his top wide receiver was like wide receiver 47 on a points per game basis. You'd be surprised. So I've thought about this too, Daniel, because I hear everything you're saying, and I've come back down to this, is that, like, you're looking at some of the names, and if we have time, I'll get to them, that are just ahead of Alan Lazard. It's like a ridiculous list, right? Like Robert Woods is currently going as wide receiver 52, right? Like,
Yeah.
I'm not saying Robert Woods is a guarantee to be the exact same player he was in Los Angeles, but if you go look at his past 3 full seasons, and the averages last year were right on track. Last 3 seasons, his averages were like 90.1 catches for 1,196 yards and 5 touchdowns per year. Like, that feels like an incredible year for Allen Lazard this year. And Robert Woods, that's just like a standard year for him. And that's the kind of name that's like just ahead of him. So I think a lot of it is attributable to there's so many good wide receivers this year. And the other thing is just that, like, not having Davante Adams, obviously massive void to fill. Wow, breaking news right there. But just like, it wouldn't stun me if this offense this year is kind of more like what it was the first year the Matt LaFleur was there. They won a ton of games, but it wasn't like Aaron Rodgers just lit the world on fire. He's been the MVP, obviously, the past 2 years. But it was like Aaron Rodgers was incredibly solid. They ran the ball extremely well. They're going to be awesome on defense this year. Like, that could be their formula this year in a division that, I'm sorry, Daniel, like, doesn't stack like the AFC West versus the NFC North, like 2 very different decks of cards for those 2 teams to have to play.
Yeah, and just to add to that, without Davante Adams there, obviously that's a massive loss, but maybe on some level it weirdly frees Aaron Rodgers up to spread the ball around even more. He doesn't need to feed the big dog, as it were. Like, he can do whatever, he can spread the ball around, and Aaron Rodgers is the type of quarterback that can make anyone good. Having said all that, and the last thing I'll also say is that I think there's a chance the Packers aren't done at wide receiver. There's still, OBJ hasn't signed with a team. Will Fuller hasn't signed with a team. Like, there's a number of sort
Stop
of
with the OBJ thing.
Yeah, and they don't need Will Fuller because they already have Sammy Watkins.
But whatever. My point is that there are name wide receivers that are still on the street, and you could see one of them taking a deal to say, you know what, I'll go spend a year with Aaron Rodgers. So they may not be done at the position. Having said all that, and so I will say that your idea that, hey, is Allen Lazard being sort of undervalued? Potentially. Like, it's a super deep position, but if you're towards the end of your draft, you're towards the end, like, is he somebody worth taking a flyer on? Absolutely, because he is somebody that has shown success in Green Bay when he's gotten an opportunity, and obviously has a massive one this year.
I just looked this up, by the way, just for that 4,000 yard note from earlier.
Yeah, bring it. Tell me why I'm wrong.
Within a couple hundred yards or so of 4,000 yards, Matt Ryan last year, 39.68, like, you got a little bit at the end of the year from Russell Gage, right? But for much of the year, it was like, wow. Mac Jones, 3,800 yards. No Patriots wide receiver was consistently started as like a top 30 to 40 play, right?
So are we just going to go from Aaron Rodgers being a quarterback that sustains a top 5 wide receiver and Davante Adams to there's literally no one in that cupboard, and he might not have a top 20 guy this year?
Possibly. I mean, possibly, yeah. I mean, again, the top players right now to fill it are like, I like Allen. Like, Allen Lazard. Here's the thing. This is like an interesting debate.
If you're throwing a dart at a Packers wide receiver, I feel like Lazard's probably the best one. Well, but Watson's interesting.
So this is an interesting conversation that could be extended a lot of different ways. Like, Allen, I think we all like Allen Lazard as a player, right? And when you're talking about Allen Lazard in a particularly favorable light over the past couple of years, you're like, this is this guy, Iowa State, 6th-round pick, like, scrappy, like, figures out a role, makes some big catches for them. In that role, I really like Allen Lazard. But if you're doing a list of the top 32 wide receiver, or the top receiver for every team in the NFL,
that's fair.
And Allen Lazard's number 1 for the Packers, where is he in the top 32, right? I mean, is he 27th, 29th? Like, if he's your number 1 wide receiver, how many teams number 1 wide receivers?
I'm trying to think of and honestly, I'm trying to think of an NFL team that has a worse number 1 than Allen Lazard.
Who would you want? Would you want Elijah Moore or
Elijah
Moore?
I think I'd rather have Elijah Moore.
Maybe Garrett Wilson if things pan out early.
Christian Kirk or Marvin Jones over.
I think I would want those guys.
Falcons. Who's
Drake London? I take
Drake London.
Yes.
I take the tight end and find another wide receiver.
My point is, and by the way, this is not trying to be like the dump on Allen Lazard session. It's just like that's kind of
and
it's a perspective thing,
in
right?
July, once we get more, once we get through camp, once we see more. But it's just, I'm just curious. As a part of doing these early mocks, these are some of the things that I've seen.
Yeah, and by the way, if he has 1,100 yards this year, I will be thrilled to be wrong because he's going to parlay that into a massive
By the way, wasn't it 2 years ago that Bob Tunyon scored a jillion touchdowns?
Yeah, it was like 10 or 13.
And so maybe he could become a prolific touchdown scorer for Green Bay, even if he's not a huge yardage guy for them.
Let's get one more in here as we have a few minutes left on the show. And I'll go to Matthew. This is an interesting conversation. Allen Robinson. This has been a very online conversation recently.
Yeah. To be clear, we put this show together over like a week and a half ago.
Okay.
And then the whole Tommy Pham, Jock Peterson thing happened. So we did that last week. And since the time that I've submitted this,
Yes.
there's been a whole online discussion between a number of
Smart people.
fantasy football analysts on Twitter about Allen Robinson. So there's a whole thread, and you can go search for him. And so a lot of smart people.
I don't normally want to advocate for you, Matthew, but you really, truly did turn this in before a lot of that conversation happened based on what our show is. So I do want to give you the credit here.
I appreciate that. Anyway, the debate online was about Allen Robinson. Is he going to I think it started with the idea that Allen Robinson was being drafted too high, and then there was people that, no, he's being drafted too low, and it just went all over the case. A lot of debate around Allen Robinson. One analyst has him as a top 10 wide receiver. Others think as a late, as wide receiver 39, where he's going on some other places, is actually also too high. I will tell you that I am pro Allen Robinson. I have him at wide receiver 26, which is significantly higher than our consensus. He is currently wide receiver 35 as our consensus. He is going as wide receiver 36 on ESPN ADP.
Okay.
I think the narrative on Allen Robinson, and this was echoed some online, is that talented wide receiver going to a better coach, better offense. He's never played with a good quarterback.
Yeah.
Last year, sort of the argument on Allen Robinson was he was quarterback proof, right? Whether it was Blake Bortles or Andy Dalton or Nick Foles or whoever it was, right? Trubisky, whoever. Like, he was just quarterback proof. And then last year he wasn't. He was just bad last year. Yeah. But I think the situation got bad between him and the Bears. I don't know that he was fully healthy. I think he was mentally checked out. And you can argue whether he should be or not. But I believe a fresh start in L.A. with Sean McVay, who's a player's coach, who's a player's coach, and not only the best quarterback of his career in Matthew Stafford, but significantly the best quarterback. Like, it's like a massive difference between Matthew Stafford and whoever the second best quarterback of his career is. If you want to say it was Justin Fields, or I don't even know who you would say. But here's the thing that I would say. 13 times last year, the anti-argument for Allen Robinson is not only last year, but also Cooper Kupp, and how many balls are there to go around? Well, last year, 13 times a Rams pass catcher not named Cooper Kupp scored 15 or more fantasy points in a game, which 15 points per game would have been wide receiver 20 last year. Okay. The Rams are 6th in red zone pass rate. Okay. I mean, like, when they get in close, Sean McVay generally likes to throw. Allen Robinson is a good red zone target. I think Cooper Kupp will get more attention this year from defensive coaches than he did maybe last year. So my expectation, I'm banking on positive touchdown regression, and I'm banking on a much better quarterback, and being in LA and being on a team where he's got a chance to win, which he's never had before in his career. Again, I'm not going whole hog here. I'm at wide receiver 26. I'm as a mid-tier wide receiver 3, but for somebody that's had as much fantasy success as he has in that situation with that quarterback and that offense, feels like in that range, that's a pretty good bet to take.
That last part that you got to, rejuvenated by the fact that he's playing with a much better quarterback, an elite quarterback, and a team, a player-friendly offense. Sean McVay has always been mindful. Last year with OBJ, right? We got to get him the ball, right?
Exactly.
And even if OBJ does return, we don't expect to see him for a while going into the season.
I don't think he'll play just on OBJ, because people keep talking about it. I don't see him playing a drop of football before November at some point.
Okay. So it could be multiple months. I'll buy all that stuff. Like, I can be spared the not named Cooper Kupp Rams number. Like, you can probably do that for every team, right? Like, a number 2, like those games in red zone percentage, like that stuff. Like, give me goal line stuff, and I'll maybe buy a little bit. But bottom line is, the stuff you said, I do buy.
And the other thing is about the Cooper Kupp stat. My only point of that is, I'm with you. You could do that for every. You could do that for Davante Adams. How many times did a Packers wide receiver not named Davante Adams? Right. You could do that for everything. I think the point is there fantasy production outside of Cooper Kupp in that passing game? And my answer is yes. Yeah. I think there is. We saw it with Robert Woods early on last year. We saw it with OBJ towards the end of last season. And so with Robert Woods in Tennessee and OBJ currently a free agent, I think Van Jefferson's a nice player. I know they've got Higbee as well. But I think that Allen Robinson becomes the number 2 in that offense and takes a lot of Robert Woods' target share from last year. If you're in that, wide receiver is so deep this year, as we just talked about with, Robert Woods isn't even inside the top 50, right? So it's so deep. But in that mid-tier, the mid-tier wide receiver 3 range, give me a guy that's had a lot of success in Allen Robinson with an elite quarterback and an elite play caller.
I think one of the things that interesting to me, do you know how much older, I was surprised by this, how much older Allen Robinson is than Cooper Kupp?
Probably younger than him, right?
He's friggin' not. He's younger than Cooper Kupp. And it feels like he's been in the league for forever.
Right, because he's been aged dramatically by having poor quarterback play. I love this move when it happened. I loved when he got moved to the Rams. I think I am very high on Allen Robinson this year.
Agreed.
I think he's a great route runner. He's, I think he will be healthy. Also, not for nothing, this does matter. Rams have one of the best medical staffs in the country. Like, their players consistently do very, very well. They have the least number of players on the injury report every year. They do very, very well. So he's going into a very good setup for him from all the peripherals, on top of the fact that he'll now have an opportunity to play with Matthew Stafford.
Cooper Kupp was like 25 when he got drafted.
We
talked about this in Dynasty about all these guys that are a little older this year because of the guys who had extra eligibility. Anyways,
how come when you asked the age question, you looked right at me?
Well, Matthew, I figured there would be no expert better than you. You know what I mean?
all right, so that'll do it for today's show. We'll be back in future Mondays. Just a programming note, like this is the time of the year. It's almost middle of June. Like between now and the middle of July, especially, like a lot of us take time to do things other than talk about fantasy football, travel, vacation, you name it, right? Boondoggling. So if you see a rotation over the next handful of shows, don't be worried. Everybody's good. Just going to be there. Everybody's taking their time to go enjoy some things besides football in their life.
Yeah, there you go.
So just a heads up.
I don't have anything besides football in my life, but yes, I would. All of you guys. All of you guys.
Beth is still with you.
She is. That's right.
Bless her
she
heart.
was this morning. I mean, I haven't checked. I haven't checked the last couple hours. So anything's possible. Our marriage is hour to hour. Has been for 15 years. But So
I want to see the summer escapades of Kinley.
She's well traveled.
She's already been well traveled.
I know.
That's true. Well, she's been to Florida. That was great.
Yeah. She's all over the place.
She's a Nantucket regular.
Can you ever ridden on a motorcycle, Field?
Okay.
Don't get your hopes up. We travel in car seats and car seats only. Maybe a stroller every once in a while. Anyways, we're back next Monday. Until then, for Matthew and I haven't seen you in so long, I had to get reacquainted. Stefania and Daniel, I am Field. We'll talk to you guys then.
Peace out.